Hey, what's up? Shandamon or Shandamon here, and today I'm here with a build comparison video for the Shadowhunter. Why, you might ask? Well, in light of recent news, in the January update newsletter, we learned that we're starting with content up to tier 3, and so I decided to make this video for new Shadowhunter players comparing the two builds. Because believe me, I've received many messages on Discord asking which build is better, so yeah. That's what I'm here to do. But first, let's start with what both engravings are and how exactly you build them. Demonic Impulse is the first engraving, which is focused on Shadowhunter's identity, demon form. This engraving removes the cooldown after reverting back to human, and further levels increase the critical chance while transformed. Typically, you'll want this at level 3 to get that 30% crit chance. This build uses specialization as a main stat, with crit as the secondary stat. Perfect Suppression is the other engraving, which is focused on the human side of Shadowhunter. This engraving disables transforming entirely, but increases the damage of all your human form skills by 20% at level 1, and also increases your gauge gain by 50%. Because the damage increases only by 5%, you can leave this at level 1. This build mainly focuses on the crit stat, with swiftness as the secondary stat. You might be wondering, why the heck does Perfect Suppression increase gauge gain by 50% even though you can't transform? Well, because you don't need to transform, there are certain skills where if you take the right tripod, they use 20% of the meter to increase the damage of the skill significantly. Think of it like an X meter from a fighting game. In tier 1 content, when you start gearing up and managing your stats, the highest one stat can usually go up to is around 800-ish, with the secondary stat of 250. There are no gems or tripod levels in this tier. However, remember that you won't be here in this tier for long. With that being said, let's first start with Demonic Impulse in tier 1. Demonic Impulse in tier 1 is, well, scuffed to say the least. The reason being is that this build relies heavily on transforming, and because you need to transform ASAP, you'll end up taking skills with tripods that increase the gauge gain. This builds skills with specialization, which increases the gauge gain from skills, the damage, and duration in demon form. However, because tripod levels don't exist, you can't further increase the gauge gain from skills. At only around 800 specialization, it's not enough to transform fast. On top of that, cooldowns are long, so after one rotation, you'll be sitting and waiting for your cooldowns. I managed to get it to 1.5 rotations in the beta, and it wasn't overall too bad, but the cooldowns were just a bit of a pain to deal with. Perfect Suppression in tier 1, however, is very good. Because you only need the engraving at level 1, it's very cheap to gear up. Once you get that level 1 Perfect Suppression, you can focus on common engravings like Grudge and whatnot. You'll want to focus on crit with swiftness as a secondary stat on your necklace. As I mentioned earlier, this build uses your gauge to enhance some of your skills. Like with Demonic Impulse, your skill cooldowns are long. The only difference is that after one rotation, you'll have at least done some good damage. Personally, I prefer Perfect Suppression for this tier. If you do decide to go Demonic Impulse, I recommend getting all the accessories and runes you need beforehand. Tier 2 has just a slightly higher stat cap than Tier 1, but it's still around the same. In this tier, gems are introduced. I'll keep this tier brief because it's just about the same as Tier 1. Demonic Impulse is just about the same in this tier as it was in the previous tier. You can get just a bit more specialization to help with transforming, and on top of that, you can get the purple wealth rune for faster identity gauge. As for gems, you need 2 gems for your demon form to benefit from: skill damage and skilled cooldown. These affect all your skills while transformed. You can also throw in some extra cooldown gems for your human skills, which can help with transforming. Overall, it's a bit less scuffed than tier 1, but you can still do it. I would honestly go with this if you have the wealth runes and decent grade accessories you need. With a pet bonus, you may be able to get 1000 specialization. It's doable, but still a bit tricky. Perfect Suppression is about the same here as it was last year. The only thing you need to worry about is getting gems for your human skills, whereas Demonic Impulse only needs 2 gems. Overall, the build is still pretty solid and easy to set up. Tier 3 is where things get fun. In this tier, both builds are viable due to having much higher stat caps on accessories, as well as introducing tripod levels and legion sets later on. Demonic Impulse here is 100% viable. Aim for at least 1.2k specialization. More is better, obviously, for more damage while transformed. The main tripods you should go for are the ones that increase gauge gain. If you pair your specialization stat with your tripod levels and also some runes, this class will feel really good to play. Currently in Russia, I transform in literally 5 skills. On top of that, you only need 2 gems, just like tier 2, the damage and cooldown gems of demon form. This makes Demonic Impulse much easier and cheaper to gear up than Perfect Suppression, granted you have the runes ready. Also, when Legion raids come out, depending on the setup, you have the option to change the secondary stat of crit into swiftness. For more info, see my tier 3 Demonic Impulse video. Perfect Suppression is also still really relevant here. Tripods and gems make this class much stronger, but in comparison, Perfect Suppression is now the more expensive build now due to the fact that you need more tripods and gems than Demonic Impulse. Later down the line of tier 3, some players actually run 1600 swiftness and 800 crit, which does make the class really fun due to it being fast. However, this is only in late tier 3. Before I end the video, I'm just going to give a brief pros and cons summary of each engraving build. Demonic Impulse. The pros of Demonic Impulse are it's very fun to play and it's also very spammy. The cooldowns are very low and it can be quite fun to just spam the skills. It's cheap to gear in tier 3 because you only need 2 gems and a few tripods. And it also has a high transformation uptime in tier 3. You will literally spend most of your time transformed in fights once you get set up. The cons of this build are it's clunky to play in tier 1 and tier 2 due to the fact that you can't transform fast enough. It's also more expensive to gear in tier 1 and tier 2 compared to Perfect Suppression. There also isn't much skill diversity because you need to take the skills that generate the most gauge. And this is just a temporary con, but you can't change the default transformation avatar. They did say they would change that in the low on. Perfect Suppression, the pros are that it's easy to set up in tier 1 and tier 2 because it's pretty cheap and easy. It works decently throughout all tiers of the game, and there's also more skill diversity, meaning more combination of human skills to use. The cons are it's more expensive than Demonic Impulse in tier 3. It also has a boring rotation because you don't actually have an identity skill, and that can basically be the deciding factor of if someone plays this class or not. Overall, both builds are fun in tier 3. However, because gauge-based classes are really clunky to play in the early stages of the game, you might consider going Perfect Suppression or a different class entirely. But then again, content is pretty easy, and I don't want to force people to play a build they don't find fun. I'm just showing you that Demonic Impulse may not be what you think it is until tier 3. But anyways, that wraps up the video. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing and clicking the bell, it helps a lot, and also checking out my Twitch channel. I'll be live streaming this game and I'll basically be no-lifing this game like a lot when the game launches. So yeah, anyways, peace!